Because most of you know what GitLab is, I'm not going to tell you about GitLab itself. I'm going to tell you about the lessons that we've learned in realizing our vision. What we want to do is we want to help enterprises like your own build better software and faster. And what we did is we built a single application, as you know, that helps you do everything you need to do within the DevOps lifecycle, going from an ID to shipping it in production and everything in between that. So I'm going to tell you how to go faster today. And we've been doing this since 2014, and by today we are 393 employees, which is exact. I checked it this morning. And we are in over 47 countries. And you might be asking, 47 countries? You have 47 offices in these countries? You'd be very wrong. We have a total of 0 offices. Every single person today working at GitLab, and if it's up to me, into perpetuity, is working from home, working from a co-working space, or any other location they might want to work. I've been working from the Beurs van Berlage today. And that gives us some interesting insights about how you should work. So let's talk about going fast. Mark Andreessen says, cycle time compression may be the most underestimated force in determining winners and losers in tech. And André, before me, already mentioned it. It is the most important thing you can do. Cycle time, it's the time from starting your plan, you have a plan, you start to work on it, to the moment that end users are seeing, feeling the changes that you've been working on. This is cycle time. I'll repeat it many times for you. So why is it important? It's very obvious when you think about it. If you have a very long cycle time, you make a particular plan, you start working on it, and maybe it takes you 6 months, which I consider to be a very, very long time. Then in those 6 months, the world might change. The market might change, the demands of your customers might change, but there's nothing you can do, because that is the time that it took you to work on this. And if you make a change to your plan, new 6 months start. So the shorter you can make this time to work on something, this cycle time, the more you're able to change your plans. Because at every point in time that you finish something, you can change your plans. Maybe the world has changed. And not just that, you now have a moment where you can gather feedback. You release something, and it might be something smaller, but you release something, so you have an opportunity to listen to feedback from your customers and to your end users. So how can we actually reduce this? How can we actually change this? So I'm going to give you 6 concrete things that you can do today to change this. And I hope some of them might actually help some of you. The first one is counterintuitive, but also so very obvious. If you want to go faster, you should do less. You're all familiar with the idea of a minimally viable product, the smallest possible form that you can release a product into the wild. It should have everything, but it should be as small as possible. If you think about existing products, you could think, well, what if we do this for every single change or for every single feature, minimally viable feature? And what I would encourage you to do, and what we've been doing, is try to release, to only work on the smallest possible atomic change, a minimally viable change, and nothing more than that. And that is what we'll be working on, and that is what we'll be releasing. And the cool thing is that once you have that, because it is something small, you can now automatically release it into the world. And of course, I should tell you, you can do all of this with GitLab. So when we have a tiny little change, and it might not even be something that users see, it might be just something in the back end. When we have something done, we roll it out automatically, up to many times a day. And if we see the error rate going up, we just roll it back. The developer gets a notification, and because the developer owns this now, they start working on it, and they fix it. And the next few are interesting, because they're not about technology. They're about communication, which we feel is one of the biggest ways the time is lost. If you work on changes, you need to establish a single source of truth. One thing that I hear constantly is that we have a lot of information in our organization, and we heard it just now. stuck in the heads of only a few people. There's information in our organization that only lives in the heads of people. When you're GitLab, and you have people all over the world, that you can't do that. Because I might need some information that is in the head of Jane, who is on the other side of the planet, and whenever I'm working, she's sleeping, and vice versa. If you establish a single source of truth, so the one place where any particular type of information is gathered, and at GitLab, for instance, what we do is we have our own issue tracker inside of GitLab. We make sure that for every single of those small changes, the single source of truth is that issue. That if you look at that one thing, there is all the information I need to understand this change, the problem, and everything related to it. And then the only thing you have to do, and this is the complete solution to having information in people's head, is to just write everything down. That's all you have to do. So today at GitLab, there is no information that only lives in my head or that only lives in one of the engineers' heads, because we made a policy that we write everything down. And it's as simple as that. And it doesn't mean that we can't have meetings. We might still have a meeting and we discuss something, but at the end of the meeting, what we do is we write down our summary in the single source of truth, which is a GitLab issue, our conclusion, and what the next steps are. And when Jane wakes up in the next day, she reads the issue, and she sees, OK, so this is what's going on, and she can keep working. So once we've established this, we make small changes. We make sure we write everything down, and everyone is clear on where's the place that we write these things down. We are essentially communicating asynchronously. It's no longer required for us, and it's not to say that we discourage it, but it's no longer required for us to be in the same time, in the same place, to be able to communicate. And so the next thing we're doing is, again, it's one of those things that seems very obvious, but why is not everyone doing it? Is that we never wait for consensus. Anyone at GitLab that is working on anything can make the decisions necessary to move forward. We never wait for consensus. In fact, we discourage looking for consensus. We empower every single person to make decisions every day, all the time. Because the vast majority of decisions are two-way doors, right? If I make a decision and it was the wrong one, for most cases, I can just revert that change. And the cost of reverting a change is almost always less than the overhead of trying to find consensus. Because let's say I'm working with Jane again, who lives in New Zealand. If I'm looking for consensus, I might ask her, Jane, what do you think of this? Do you agree with this? I have to wait 12 hours for Jane to wake up. She writes a reply. 12 hours later, I now get to read what Jane is. She misunderstood me. There we go. We're now 2 days lost just on making a simple decision, whereas the overhead to revert that change might have been 2 hours. And then the last tip is to remove the toolchain complexity. This is a technical one. One thing that we're seeing is that companies are incredibly proud of choosing the 10, 20, 30 tools that they have. And then they say, OK, this is great. We have all these tools now. Now we have to cross-integrate them. So that's 30 to the factor 30 tools. That's a lot of integrations and tools that you need to maintain, that you need to upgrade. But more importantly, that's a lot of places to lose information. Because if something goes wrong now in one of these systems, and you have to find out what happened, you have to go through each and one of these individual tools, if they're not perfectly integrated, or maybe because that integration is lacking. And maybe you don't have access to every single one of these things. It avoids having a single source of truth, and it adds significant overhead. And now that everyone is organizing their teams to work on microservices and be very independent, this is even getting worse. So you can remove the toolchain complexity very easily by using GitLab. It's just a single application. And that doesn't mean you don't have to use just that, but you can integrate a few other things. But having hundreds of tools is not something to be proud of. All right, so you take all these things. What is the outcome? You now have small changes that are easily rolled out and rolled back. And this is what we do every day at GitLab. And for every single change, there's a single conversation, a single thread that you can read which is every single change, everything that happened is linked to everything. It starts with, this is the idea that we had, and it ends with, this is how it impacted our metrics. And it's all in the same place. And everyone can always move forward with their work, because everything is written down. Nothing is holding them up. Only in the rare case that a decision that can't be reverted do we stop work. But in almost all cases, people can move forward with their work. And efficiency is incredible. And lastly, and most importantly, everyone is always looking at the same things. Everyone is on the same page. So you might say, this is great. Like, it's good for you guys. Like, but this is actually work. So this is what we sell, right? We sell to customers a single application, but it gives you these emergent benefits. And this is an example of what the outcome is when customers started adopting GitLab. Ticketmaster had 15 times faster builds. It's pretty good. Xway went from having yearly releases to releasing every 2 weeks. And of course, they're looking at going even faster than that. And a German company went 120 times faster. They went from several hours to several seconds for most common operations that they were doing in QA. And that has led that we built quite an impressive portfolio of customers. There's over 150,000 organizations today using GitLab. ING, TNO, many, many others. But more importantly, because we've been using this internally, we were able to move incredibly fast. And I told you, we started with this in 2014. But at the time, the only thing we had was code repositories. And in 2015, we said, OK, we want to build in continuous integration in GitLab. And we were entering a market where there were many incumbents, Jenkins, and you're all familiar with, right? They were leading the market, and everyone was using them. How could you possibly compete with them? So this was Q3 2015. 2 years later, Forrester chose us as the leader in the Forrester CI tools wave. Right there in the top right. So my question to you all is, what is your cycle time? Tell me, and I would love to work together on finding ways to speed that up. Thank you very much.